Although tonight's meeting with the client was exhausting, it showed some progress, and I was quite happy. After seeing the client off and noticing it was already late, I dismissed the driver, Jack, and hailed a taxi straight to Mary's place. A few months ago, John, the hotel owner, invited some colleagues for dinner, and I was present. For some reason, I was immediately attracted to the beautiful waitress, Mary. Using the excuse of going to the restroom, I cornered her in a secluded spot and asked if she would like to work at my hotel. Mary blushed and ran away. Shortly after, I received a call from Mary saying she was willing to work for me. I couldn't bear to let her work, so I immediately bought a large house, kept it a secret from my wife, and supported her. But just a month later, Mary was no longer satisfied with this secretive arrangement and constantly demanded that I divorce my wife, Linda, and marry her. How could that be possible? The thought alone was laughable. When Mary saw me, she pouted and looked displeased. I knew it was because of the divorce issue. You need to give me some time, don't you? Divorce isn't something that can be done just like that, I said, as I usually did, putting my arm around Mary and using sweet words to coax her. Honestly, I never intended to divorce Linda, being with Mary was purely for fun. You're trying to deceive me again. Mary broke free from my hands and shouted, I'll kill myself tonight and haunt you forever. I had come over to relax but didn't expect this outcome, which was really disappointing. I rolled my eyes at Mary and didn't take her words seriously, then went to bed. I slept deeply and woke up in the middle of the night. Where's Mary? I rubbed my sleepy eyes and noticed Mary wasn't in bed. Feeling strange, I got up and looked around. The bathroom door was ajar. I pushed it open and, by the dim light from the living room, looked inside. I was instantly terrified. Mary, dressed in a white nightgown, was hanging from a hook on the ceiling, her body straight and facing away from the door. That white silk nightgown was something I had just bought for her last week. I was petrified, with only one thought in my mind, to flee from this place. I hastily grabbed my clothes and ran out the door. Standing on the deserted street, the cold wind made me regret my decision. I shouldn't have just fled, at the very least, I should have dealt with Mary's body. Fortunately, I had always been cautious, and no one knew about my relationship with Mary. With this in mind, I calmed down a bit. With trembling hands, I lit a cigarette and thought for a long time before deciding to get some help to discreetly bury Mary's body. I dialed my driver Jack's phone number. I appreciated Jack, he had been loyal to me for many years and never pried into matters that didn't concern him. It wasn't long before Jack arrived in his car. I opened the car door, got in, and briefly explained the situation to him. Jack looked fearful and hesitant. Seeing this, I patted my chest and said, after this is done, I won't forget your help. How about that? Feel better now? With my reassurance, Jack had no choice but to comply. Following my directions, he drove to Mary's place. I pushed open the door, and a cold wind hit me, making me shiver and my legs tremble. I pushed Jack forward and sat down on the floor, my legs no longer obeying me. After a while, I heard Jack's low call and mustered the courage to walk in. Jack had already wrapped the body in a bedsheet. He gestured for me to help him move it. As soon as I bent down, my whole body froze, pointing at Mary's body, too scared to speak. It's okay, she probably died with her eyes open, Jack said, closing Mary's wide-open eyes with his hand. Jack and I carried the body, stuffed it into the car's trunk, and quickly drove towards the suburbs. Halfway there, the car suddenly jolted violently as if it had run over something. Jack's face turned pale, and he hit the brakes, stopping the car by the roadside. Jack and I looked at each other, both hoping the other would check, but neither of us wanted to go alone. Finally, we agreed to get out together. We looked under the car but found nothing. When we checked the back, we were horrified to see the trunk wide open and the body gone, leaving only the bedsheet. Did it fall out on the road? I asked, my voice trembling. It's possible, Jack nodded. We drove back along the road, carefully looking for the body. We drove all the way back to Mary's place, but the road was clean, with no sign of a body. A gust of wind blew, and Jack suddenly pointed at my car window, his eyes wide with fear. I felt a chill down my neck and didn't dare to turn around, completely terrified. Jack suddenly started the car and sped off. By the time we reached the city, it was dawn. I saw a deformed face pressed against the window, Jack said, still shaken. For the next 2 days, I didn't know how I managed. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mary's wide-open eyes. And the body, how did it vanish so mysteriously? I made excuses to cancel all my meetings with clients and stayed in my hotel office, keeping an eye on the news. Strangely, there were no reports about an abandoned body. Could it be true, as some say, that Mary had turned into a zombie? I also thought of the deformed face Jack saw on the window, and a chill spread from my heart. 2 days later, I found a buyer and decisively sold the house at a low price. For several days afterward, nothing strange happened. I finally felt relieved and fully immersed myself in negotiations with clients. If all the talks went as smoothly as tonight, I could sign the cooperation contract with the client in half a month. By then, with the client's investment, my hotel would be the only 5-star hotel in the city. I returned home in high spirits and, for the first time, gave Linda a kiss. The atmosphere felt off, and I was taken aback. Linda's face was stern and unpleasant, her eyes glaring as if she wanted to devour me. "What's the deal with that house?" "I want to hear it," Linda spat out each word slowly. "No one knew about the house sale." "How did Linda find out?" I was puzzled. "There are many people out to get me now, don't believe their rumors," I said nonchalantly. "I'm telling you, don't play dumb with me. Someone already came to our door, saying you tricked them by selling a haunted house." Linda was almost yelling, pointing at my nose. Hearing this, I was shocked and quickly came up with an excuse. "The house we live in now is too old. I bought a new big one secretly to surprise you. But a local friend told me the location was bad and haunted, so I sold it and planned to buy another one." Linda found my explanation reasonable and stopped arguing, saying she would go and see the house in a couple of days. Early the next morning, I visited the buyer. From the buyer's face, I saw a look of twisted fear. The buyer told me that every night at midnight, they heard a woman crying outside the door, a soft yet eerie sound, not loud but terrifying enough. At this point, I felt guilty and had nothing to say. I had no choice but to refund the buyer and take the house back. The next day, Linda asked for the house key and eagerly went to see the house after getting the address. After seeing the house, she immediately liked it and insisted on moving in, causing a scene at home. I had no choice but to move the family there. That night, I spent the entire day negotiating with a client over a minor detail and felt very tired. Since I still had to organize some documents in the evening, I decided not to go back home and stayed at the hotel. At dawn the next morning, Linda called me, crying, "I encountered a ghost last night, a female ghost. Come back quickly." My heart sank, realizing something was wrong. I hurried back home, and Linda, still shaken, pulled me aside. She told me that in the middle of the night, she heard a woman crying outside the door. She got out of bed and looked through the peephole, seeing a young woman in a white nightgown, with disheveled hair, crouching at our door, crying miserably with her hands covering her head. I gasped, unable to recover for a long time. Could it really be a ghost? I wouldn't believe it without seeing it myself. That evening, I cancelled all my engagements and decided to stay up all night to see what was going on. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, I could barely stay awake. Half asleep, I suddenly heard a noise outside the door, followed by a faint crying sound. I jolted awake and almost jumped out of bed. I didn't dare turn on the light and steadied myself before looking through the peephole. Outside was pitch dark, and I couldn't see anything. That didn't make sense. There was a motion sensor light outside. If there was any movement, it should have turned on. Could it be that the sensor light doesn't work on ghosts? The thought gave me goosebumps. Suddenly, a sliver of light shone through the peephole, and I saw a bloodshot red eyeball staring eerily at me from the other side. I was unprepared, my mind went blank, and I couldn't catch my breath. I fell backward, hitting the ground, and tried to scream but no sound came out. Linda started crying in fear, pounding on my chest until I finally came to my senses. I thought for a moment and looked through the peephole again, seeing a flash of white fabric disappearing around the staircase corner. I never believed in ghosts, but this was inexplicable. Fear grew in my heart like wild grass in spring. Now I couldn't concentrate on negotiating with clients. I started to regret ever getting involved with Mary. Linda and I spent the entire day busy moving. Linda was so frightened that she preferred to return to our old house. But I was still determined to find out if the crying ghost outside was Mary. That night, I called Jack to accompany me to uncover the mystery. As usual, around 2 or 3 in the morning, the crying started again, faintly coming through the door crack. With Jack by my side, I felt braver. I squinted and looked through the peephole. Outside the door, a woman in a white nightgown was squatting. From the back, she looked almost identical to Mary. The woman seemed to sense someone was watching her and stopped crying. She let out a couple of eerie laughs, sending chills down my spine. She stood up, waved at me without turning her head, and said, "Come, darling, follow me. I will show you where my body is." She then walked a few steps ahead and stopped, as if waiting for me. I decided to go for it. I couldn't escape this anyway, so I might as well follow her. Maybe I could find Mary's body, give her a proper burial, and help her pass on, possibly escaping this curse. I gave Jack a look, steeled myself, and opened the door to follow the woman. It was as if she had eyes on the back of her head. When we sped up, she sped up, when we slowed down, she slowed down, always maintaining a certain distance from us. We walked until we reached a building, and I was startled to see it was a funeral home. The woman let out a few sinister laughs and went inside. Jack, pale-faced, pointed to a large tree not far away and said, "Boss, I can't go any further. I'll wait for you there." I glared at Jack, cursing him in my mind for being so cowardly. I followed the woman to a large incense burner. Mary took off her shoes and threw them into the burner, saying softly, "Finally home." Then the woman suddenly turned around and gave me a ghastly smile, her face deathly pale. "It really is Mary." I screamed and ran away as fast as I could. I ran out of the funeral home and reached the big tree, looking around. Where was Jack? I was puzzled when suddenly I heard, "Are you done yet? Why do you keep stepping on me? Do you want to kill me again?" A blackened head emerged from the soil, with a pair of somewhat bright eyes staring at me. It was Jack. He reached out from the dirt and leaves, grabbing at me. A gust of wind tore his sleeves into strips that fluttered in the wind. I was so terrified that I fainted on the spot. 2 days later, my wife Linda found me wandering on the street. I was disheveled and completely out of my mind, unable to recognize my own family. That afternoon, Linda took me to a mental hospital. Another 2 days later, in the mental hospital, I sat in front of the TV, disheveled and vacant-eyed. On the TV, my competitor, Boss John, was shaking hands with my clients after signing the contract. With a regretful tone, he said, "Originally, you were supposed to work with one of my most capable competitors. Unfortunately, fate was not kind, and he went mad. Let's raise the first toast to wish him a speedy recovery. Cheers." "Well said. Well said." I clapped my hands and laughed foolishly. Suddenly, my smile froze, and I pointed at the TV in terror, saying, "They are ghosts. They want to harm me." The 2 people on the TV were Mary and Jack, standing to the left and right of Boss John. Perhaps I will never understand, even until my death, that the first time I saw Mary's body hanging in the bathroom, it was actually just a lifelike plastic mannequin.